Australians stuck overseas are telling me that they feel like they've been abandoned by their own government, that the government has for months ignored their pleas for help to return home, and in doing so, this government's failure to act is generating widespread anxiety among people stuck overseas and also their families at home. It's costing people huge amounts of money, enormous amounts just to try and get a seat on a flight. And it's exacerbating pre-existing mental health conditions to a point where individuals and their families are fearful for their lives. This is a fear that runs through many of the emails and phone calls to my office. Parents who know the signs of adult children, who can see slides into depression, and disclosures of suicidal feelings by trapped Aussies. When John Howard declared in 2001 that under his leadership we will decide who comes to this country and the circumstances in which they come, these Australians could never have imagined that there would be a Liberal government applying the same words to them. The Prime Minister's promise of getting everyone home by Christmas, and now his attempt to spin it and say he's done what he promised, is an absolute insult. There are 37,000 Australians stuck overseas. 8,000 of them are considered vulnerable, and I have emails from some of those. And the Prime Minister has just 8 days to keep his promise to get all these Australians home to their families and out of quarantine by Christmas. His claims are an insult to people like Liz, whose son has been stuck in Germany. He's been registered for months with DFAT, and he was recently told that his flight, booked for yesterday, had been cancelled. He has no access to replacement flights, with 3 repatriation flights from Heathrow completely full. Like so many, Liz's son has had no work for 2 months, has no accommodation and is couch surfing. It's winter, it's -2 degrees. You can imagine the mental health impacts. There's Maddie, whose German visa to work as an au pair has expired, and she's sleeping on a friend's mother's couch in Italy as her remaining funds run low, all the while trying to find a way home. And then there's Donna and her family in India. Now, they were there for a year's work but were unable to get a flight until just last week, when they flew to England in order to get a flight home. As an Australian citizen, Donna said she never thought she'd be on the wrong end of Australia's border policies. She points out that they had only 3 days between the advisory to come home when India went into lockdown, and it wasn't enough time to pack up an apartment and pack up their lives there. I have constituents trying to get back from Dubai, from Laos, from Taiwan, Denmark, the UK, Canada, the list goes on. Example after example where the government has forced them to reveal personal, private details of their health in order to try to get some treatment, to get them special treatment to get themselves home. They should not have to do that and expose themselves to bureaucrats. Even when they do eventually return home, there's significant damage that will have been done to their mental health, to their finances and, depending on their exposure to COVID, to their physical health. You've got to ask, why aren't there chartered flights, or why isn't the RAF being used to bring these people home? We have no explanation from the government why they're not prepared to do that. They're prepared to put on a plane for Matthias Cormann, and they're not prepared to bring Australians home. Those opposite are going to blame the states and the caps on quarantine for the failure to get everyone home by Christmas. They'll single out Labor states, even though it's the practice of every state. But it begs the question, if border security is a federal responsibility, why has the federal government just handed it to the states? And I'll tell you why, because it's a government that tries to absolve itself of any responsibility when it can pass it to someone else. It's done it with aged care during COVID, letting the states carry the can. It's done it with the Royal Commission recommendations for a national firefighting fleet. Again, let the states take responsibility. And it did it just like it did with Ruby Princess. It's doing it again with COVID and border protection, sitting back with a smirk and a shrug saying, oh, it's not us. Yes, it is. The Prime Minister could boost safety quarantine capacity. There's a report on his desk telling him how. Australians have a right to come home. This government has a responsibility to make it happen. And it looks like all those people stranded are only going to get a broken promise for Christmas.